Two of the biggest reveals at EICMA this year are under 1000cc, and I can't remember the last time that was the case. I also can't remember the last time Suzuki revealed or released a brand new from the ground up model. It wasn't the amazing Suzuki GSX-S 1000 GT, which relied heavily on the previous models and 2005 Gixxer engine, nor was it last week's announcement of the Vstrom 1050DE, which again relies on the 2002 inspired original Vstrom motor. Honda, of course, revealed their long-awaited reincarnated Transalp XL750 on Tuesday, only to have some of their limelight darkened by the shadow of a very well-kept secret, the all-new from the ground-up Suzuki V-Strom 800DE, itself perhaps a reincarnation of the Dr. Big. So these bikes have some history and some form, so rather like two middleweights in the boxing ring, the big question is how do they compare? And the answer is, until anyone has ridden them, we won't really know. But here's my take, based on the first impressions and specs of these bikes. But before we weigh in on this, let's first confront the elephant in the room. The Vstrom 800DE is not a V-twin. Despite Suzuki's audacious label, however, it is a parallel twin, or as some may call it, a vertical twin, which may be how Suzuki are getting around this name. Furthermore, it's not yet replacing either the Vstrom 650 or the 1050 in the range, which are both still listed in Suzuki's 2023 lineup. So now's your chance to spring for one of the V-twins before I suspect the 650 is removed, perhaps in the next year or two, with the SV 650 as well. And while the Vstrom 800DE is not a V-twin, like Honda's Transalp and Yamaha's Tenere, its all-new parallel twin motor has a 270-degree crank to emulate the dirt-worthy engine pulses that a V-twin lays down. It also has two counterbalancers at 90 degrees to the crank. Personally, despite owning a Vstrom 1000 currently myself, I think this is the way to go. The parallel twin is more compact, allowing for better weight distribution in the frame, it's lighter, critical for off-road, and it's cheaper to produce, needing only one cylinder head. And before I go any further, let me explain that I will compare these as ADV bikes primarily, although I imagine they would be fabulous tourers and even urban commuters as well. I do think the bikes are somewhat different in their strengths, and that will be revealed as we look at them more closely. But back to the question, how do these bikes compare with each other? Well, let's discuss the specs first. On paper at least, many journos are happy to give the nod in the engine department to the Transalp. The Honda appears, at first glance, to pip the Suzuki in the engine department simply by putting out 90 horsepower compared to the Vstrom's 82 horsepower. And for street-light drag racing, that may be a win to the Transalp. But all is not as it seems. To get that 90 horsepower from the Transalp, you have to wind it up to a stratospheric 9,500 RPM, whereas the Vstrom 800DE's engine will cough up its full complement of 82 horses at 1,000 RPM less. That the Suzuki is likely the gruntier of the two bikes in the real-world situations is further confirmed by its higher torque output of 58 foot-pounds at 500 RPM lower in the rev range compared to the Honda's 55 foot-pounds at 72,050 RPM. While the Suzuki will likely be smoother, being the first bike ever produced with two counterbalances at right angles to the crankshaft, it will likely be the better off-road motor as well, as low-end grunt is what you need in the gravel. So for now, we'll have to wait on this one, but if I was forced to make a prediction, I'd say the Suzuki's engine is more fit for purpose here if we're talking ADV Tourer. This potential off-road bias in the Suzuki's favor is also strongly hinted at in other areas too, namely the chassis and the suspension. The Transalp suspension, while being 43mm inverted showers at the front and an unnamed shock on the rear, is only adjustable for preload. The Vstrom suspension is more premium, again being showers both front and rear, but more importantly being fully adjustable with preload, compression and rebound damping, meaning you can really dial the bike in, which is very important for any off-road that an adventure tourer wants to do. On the rear, the Suzuki gets a gas piggyback shock, which is also adjustable. The ground clearance on the Suzuki is 10 millimeters higher at 220 millimeters, while the suspension travel on the 800DE is also longer at 220 millimeters both ends compared to the Transalp's 200 millimeters of travel on the front and 190 millimeters of travel on the rear. Perhaps just as important, both manufacturers are claiming 54 miles per gallon or 4.4 liters per 100 kilometers fuel consumption. The Suzuki's 20-liter tank hints at a greater range then, definitely added security when compared to the 17-liter tank of the Honda. Finally, if this comparo is about off-road cred, then the fact that the Suzuki V-Strom subframe is bolted on rather than welded on like the Transalp's means that in an off-road tumble, if damaged, the subframe can be replaced on the Suzuki rather than writing the Honda off. This will be a big miss for any potential dirt-orientated adventure riders out there who are leaning towards the Transalp. Of course, all of this is less important if the bikes are to be used for commuting, although I'd argue, for touring, with the added range and more premium suspension, the Suzuki is also better set up. But not so fast, Suzuki camp. A big consideration for some, particularly those wanting to travel off-road, is weight. I'm one of them. The Honda is considerably lighter than the V-Strom, tipping the scales at a claimed wet weight of 459 pounds or 203 kilograms, compared to the V-Strom's bulkier claimed curb weight of 230 kilograms or 507 pounds. That is not an inconsiderable difference, and as viewers of this channel know, my number one criteria for doing any off-roading is weight. While some of this extra bulk on the V-Strom can be explained away by carrying nearly a gallon more fuel, bark busters, and a plastic engine guard, the V-Strom is still considerably heavier than the Transalp. While both bikes come with spoke 21-inch front wheels requiring inner tubes, certainly better for off-road than tubeless tires by dint of the fact that spare tubes can be carried way more easily and replaced in a pinch, the Honda gets my nod for the back wheel being a more universal 18-inch rather than the Suzuki's 17-inch on the V-Strom. More choice in the 18-inch realm means more chance of replacing that tire in Bolivia or Mongolia. However, considering many of these bikes will likely see no more dirt than the cigar ash flicked off a nosy git in a Starbucks car park, none of these virtues which favor the V-Strom may be a consideration to the urban commuter. Of more interest to the urban commuter, or even perhaps the short-range tourer, may be the phone connectivity or turn-by-turn nav which the Honda has and the Suzuki doesn't. A big oversight by both manufacturers, though, is the lack of cruise control offered. Neither the V-Strom nor the Transalp gets cruise, either as standard or as a possible upgrade. That is going to cost them sales. Both of these bikes are aimed at adventure touring. Touring these days seems to imply cruise control, although I have always gotten along without it myself. Many of my viewers often complain about the lack of it on various bikes. This hopefully will be remedied in the future. Both bikes have almost identical rider aids, both having 4 riding modes and a gravel mode for off-road. Both bikes allow the rider to switch off the rear ABS and the traction control completely if you want to. Perhaps the Honda tips the scales on this one then, given its phone connectivity. Then there are the looks, and this, I know, is subjective. We shouldn't even really talk about them, but I'm going to. The Transalp comes in the handsome and nostalgic blue, red and white Ross White tricolor with the 80s style lettering. Matte iridium grey, metallic, or matte ballistic black metallic are the other two choices, all of which look really nice. My favorite of the 3 quite avant-garde V-Strom 800DE color schemes is the champion yellow and blue, probably because it reminds me of my current Husaberg FE390 Enduro bike, but both the glass sparkle black and the glass matte mechanical grey push it hard in my opinion. I think both companies have done a great job on the styling, with the beakless Honda no doubt getting the nod from the nostalgic crowd, and the more angular and modern-looking Suzuki getting the nod from the younger crowd. Even those stacked lights are growing on me. Finally, there's the price. Both are aimed at potentially capitalizing on the T7's success while offering more capability to their own customers. The Transalp is a stepping stone perhaps from the CB500X up eventually to the Africa Twin, and the 800DE is asking prospective Vstrom 650 owners to make the jump up to a more capable, dedicated, purpose-built, off-road ADV bike. Pricing has not yet been announced, but expect these two bikes to be right alongside the Tenere 700 in pricing, with perhaps the Suzuki being a shade cheaper as they traditionally are, although looking at the fit and finish of it, it may well come in slightly more expensive than the Transalp. Whatever their ultimate prices, there won't be much between them. Not enough, I feel, to swing a buyer one way or another. For that, you'll have to decide what you want to use it for and then ride it to see if it's fit for your purpose. My perspective, for what it's worth, is that I'd give the nod to the Suzuki as the more off-road capable adventure touring option given its better suspension, ground clearance, range, and bolted-on subframe, with perhaps the Transalp getting the nod for commuting given its slightly more exciting engine spec. But what do you think? Which one of these bikes grabs your attention the most? Has the long-awaited Transalp lived up to your expectations? Or does it flatter to deceive, in your opinion? Is the surprise arrival of the Vstrom 800DE a welcome addition to the mid-sized adventure touring market? Or do the Touareg and Tenere still have this sewn up, in your opinion? Would you consider either of these bikes? Or did you expect more? I'd be really interested to know. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
Once again, thanks for watching, everyone. If this is the first time you've watched, please consider subscribing. I do product reviews, motorcycle reviews, off-road and on-road vlogs, as well as tours. Don't forget to follow me on social media, that's Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, and to like, and especially, I'm begging you here folks, subscribe. This is the BlueMarbleRider, out.